Welcome to the Prana Fictitious Story channel. Here,
You will find captivating stories filled with emotions, drama, and suspense. So, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and become part of this thrilling world of storytelling. Karan, however, was still awake. He could hear Arav's soft breathing coming from the other corner of the room, and the pull inside him grew even stronger. Seeing Arav's calm and unaware face, the warmth in Karan's heart intensified. It was now or never. Karan quietly stood up, each of his steps slow and deliberate. He moved toward the bed, his heart pounding loudly. The moonlight streaming in through the window fell on Arav's face, giving his peaceful features an almost ethereal glow. Karan couldn't stop himself from moving closer, from wanting to feel his presence. He knelt beside the bed, watching Arav for a long time. His fingers hesitantly reached toward Arav's face, brushing lightly against his jawline, barely touching his skin. Arav shifted slightly, a faint crease forming between his brows. Days passed. That incident still lingered in Arav's mind. He sat on the sofa, a cup of coffee in his hands, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake off what had happened between him, Raghav, and Karan. Arav had tried to move on, to push those thoughts away, but the memory kept coming back, especially Raghav's intense gaze and touch. Avoiding Raghav in the office had become a daily task. Whenever Arav saw Raghav, he found some excuse to leave. But the more he tried to escape, the stronger the memories came rushing back. Raghav's intensity, his touch. Arav just couldn't forget. The doorbell rang, breaking his thoughts. He looked toward the door, confused. Who could it be at this hour? A strange mix of nervousness and excitement settled in his chest. He got up to open the door. Standing outside was Karan. Karan's face was calm, but there was something different in his eyes. An intensity, a focus, as if he had something to say or ask. Ever since Karan had left, peace seemed to have disappeared from Arav's life. Raghav's smug smirk alone was enough to set his blood boiling. And now, at this late hour, Arav tried to appear relaxed, but there was a slight tension in his voice. Karan walked inside without a word. He glanced at Arav and then scanned the entire room. His voice held urgency. Arav tried to act casual and said, "Yeah, everything's fine." But Karan didn't believe him. "Are you really okay?" Karan asked, looking into Arav's eyes. "Tell me the truth. What happened?" Arav averted his gaze. He played with the sleeve of his shirt and muttered, "Nothing, just work stress." Karan observed him carefully. "Don't fool me. I've known you since childhood." He placed a hand on Arav's shoulder. Arav's heart started beating faster. Instead of calming him, Karan's touch only made him more nervous. Karan spoke softly. "Tell me what's going on in your heart and mind. Don't hide from me." Arav looked up at him. His eyes held a storm of emotions. Karan's intensity was breaking down his defenses. After a moment of silence, Karan took Arav's hand. Arav's entire body stiffened. Karan took a deep breath and said gently, "I know you won't tell me anything right now, but don't push me away. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Arav simply nodded. Karan slowly let go of his hand and stepped back, but the tension between them remained. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the night. Before leaving, Karan lightly touched Arav's hand. Arav froze. The touch was subtle, yet it sent a deep shiver through him. He felt something spark within, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything. Karan spoke softly, "I should go. I have a meeting in the morning, but I'll see you soon." Then he walked out the door. Arav watched him leave. But this time, something had changed inside him. The emotions between Raghav and Karan were confusing him, yet he was still trying to ignore them. The next few days were filled with turmoil and uncertainty for Arav. The images wouldn't leave his mind. It was late at night when Arav finally returned home after finishing work. His apartment was quiet. Even the faint noises of the city barely reached him through the window. Arav had thought he would be alone tonight. But as soon as he saw Karan standing in front of his room, his entire plan fell apart. Karan's sudden arrival came with an excuse, that he had something important to discuss related to work, something very urgent. Arav unlocked the door, and both of them stepped inside the room. "So, Karan, what's going on? What was so important?" Arav asked, while setting his laptop aside, trying to keep the atmosphere light. But Karan, being himself, didn't answer directly. Instead, he wandered around the apartment as if he was observing something. Arav knew something was going on in Karan's mind, something that was bothering him, but it didn't seem to be work-related. Today, he seemed more withdrawn than usual. Arav could feel Karan's gaze repeatedly shifting toward him, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to do it. "Nothing special," Karan finally said, his voice unusually soft. "I just thought I'd stay here tonight. It's been a while since I came by. Because of meetings, I had to travel to another country, and it took longer than expected." Arav simply nodded, not asking any more questions. They had known each other for years, so visiting each other's apartments or staying over wasn't unusual. But that usual comfort between them felt lost tonight, as if the distance between them had grown wider, and every glance, every unspoken word, carried a weight neither of them could ignore. Arav didn't say anything when Karan decided to stay the night. He just nodded and left, while Karan settled onto the couch. This wasn't the first time Karan had stayed over, but tonight felt different. The proximity, the tension, the heavy silence, everything was so intense that it was impossible to ignore. As the night passed, Arav tried to sleep. His body was exhausted from the day's work, craving rest, but his mind was still restless. He switched off the lights and slipped under the blanket, but his mind was still clouded with confusion. Karan, Raghav, and everything between them. Yet slowly, sleep began pulling him in, and his thoughts gradually quieted. Arav was exhausted from the day's events, and though his mind was tangled with confusion, the bed was comfortable, the warmth of the blanket soothing. But there was something different in the air. Karan, however, couldn't sleep. He sat silently on the couch, his hands gripping the armrest tightly. He could hear the faint sound of Arav's breathing from the other side of the room, and that sound alone made the tension within him grow stronger. His gaze kept drifting toward Arav's bedroom door, his eyes fixed on the sleeping figure beyond it. His heart was still racing. He had come here just to spend some time, but the pull toward Arav was growing unbearable with each passing second. There was a restlessness within him, a storm raging inside that he was losing control over. Tonight felt different, a restless yet intoxicating night. But this pull, this intensity, he had never felt it so strongly before. For the first time, he was failing to suppress his emotions. Meanwhile, Arav was deep in slumber in the other room, completely unaware of the turmoil between them. The room was silent except for his soft breaths breaking through the stillness of the night. His innocence and unknowing presence sent waves of chaos through Karan's heart. Karan rose from the couch, his footsteps light against the floor. Against his own will, he moved toward Arav's bedroom, where he lay asleep in peaceful oblivion. Looking at him, Karan felt something indescribable, a faint shiver running through his body. His hands trembled slightly. He wanted to touch him, to feel his warmth, but he held himself back. Not yet. He stopped at the edge of the bed, his eyes drinking in Arav's features, illuminated by the soft moonlight. In the pale glow, he looked like a sculpture carved from wax, serene, untouched. His delicate breaths, the stillness of the moment, it all stirred something deep in Karan. It felt like Arav's presence had pulled him beyond all limits, every emotion within him screaming to get closer. Why? He asked himself. Why was this desire so deep? Why was this pull so strong? He had no answers. Taking a shaky step forward, his breathing turned heavier. Each step drew him closer, as if an unseen force was guiding him. He didn't want Arav to wake up. He couldn't disturb his peace. But still, something was pulling him in. Looking at Arav's sleeping form, his calm and unaware expression, the warmth inside Karan only grew. Now or never. Karan stood still for a moment, his every movement slow, deliberate. He approached the bed, his heartbeat deafening in his ears. The moonlight filtering through the window bathed Arav's face in a gentle glow, giving him an almost otherworldly beauty. Karan couldn't stop himself anymore. He wanted to be close, to feel the warmth he had always denied himself. Lowering himself to his knees beside the bed, he gazed at Arav for a long time. His fingers hesitantly reached out, brushing near Arav's jawline, just barely grazing his skin. Arav stirred slightly, a faint crease forming between his brows. But he didn't wake up. Karan's heart stopped for a second. He had to be careful. If Arav woke up now, if he saw him like this, it would be over. But he couldn't resist. This feeling was beyond his control. His hand moved forward again, his fingers trembling as they brushed through Arav's hair. A soft strand fell over his forehead, and without thinking, Karan gently tucked it behind his ear. It was such a small, intimate gesture. Something Karan had always wanted to do, but never dared. But tonight felt different. His breathing turned ragged. He leaned in, his lips just inches from Arav's ear, drinking in his scent. Arav shifted again, this time turning slightly toward Karan. His breathing deepened, his body instinctively seeking warmth, unknowingly drawing closer. Karan swallowed hard. The tension between them had reached its peak. He should stop now, before things spiraled out of control. He couldn't afford to push Arav away. And yet, as if drawn by an invisible force, his hand moved toward Arav's hair once more, his fingers trembling. The silky strands shimmered under the moonlight, mesmerizing him. He tucked another stray lock behind Arav's ear, his fingers lightly brushing against his soft skin. A shock ran through Karan's body. Arav shifted again, this time turning fully toward Karan, his face now inches away. Thank God, he was still asleep. Karan's heart pounded. His pulse was erratic, his breaths uneven. He knew he was treading on dangerous ground. One wrong move and everything would be ruined. But the moment was too powerful to resist. Slowly, hesitantly, he leaned in closer. The air between them was thick with unspoken tension. Their breaths mingled, Arav's warm exhale ghosting over Karan's skin. The world seemed to fall silent. Time stood still. Karan's eyes traced over Arav's face, his peaceful closed eyelids, his slightly parted lips, the quiet beauty that had always entranced him. He couldn't stop himself anymore. His breathing grew heavier, his heartbeat thundered in his chest. There was only a sliver of space between them now. And then, as if drawn by a force beyond himself, Karan closed the distance, pressing the softest kiss against Arav's cheek. The touch was feather-light, hesitant, as if afraid to break the moment. His lips barely grazed Arav's skin, but the warmth of that touch sent a wildfire through his entire being. It wasn't just a kiss. It was longing. It was desire. It was love, raw and unspoken. Arav's skin was warm beneath his lips, his breath sweet and steady. Karan felt himself drowning in the moment, losing himself in the quiet intimacy of it. And then, slowly, he pulled away. His heart was still racing, his body still trembling. He looked at Arav, still lost in sleep, untouched by the storm raging inside Karan. Karan remained there, staring at him, memorizing every detail, as if capturing this moment forever. One fleeting moment, one stolen touch, and his entire world had changed.